Yeah. Okay. Sorry, bit late. Sorry, some guest. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the continuation of the discussion on the foundational texts of Indian philosophy. This meeting will be recorded and it will be posted on YouTube. So if you have missed any of the previous discussions, you may find it on YouTube. Also, there will be a question and answer segment at the end of the discussions. If you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask. Please use the raise hand feature also in order to maintain the queue. Also, if you are not speaking, please mute yourselves in order to minimize the disturbances. Thank you.
Recording in progress.
Thank you, Prajwal, for the introduction, and I'm sorry I'm a bit late today because some other obligations, So, we are continuing our discussion on Madhva philosophy, and as we go forward, you'll find something very interesting. But before beginning today, I just want to give the context of these systems of philosophy. So, the overall landscape of the canonical tradition of Hinduism in general. So, we have to understand that the most fundamental canons of Hindu Vedanta traditions are the four Vedas, Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, and Atharva Veda. These are the four important foundational canons of Hindu Vedantic tradition, philosophy, heritage, values, everything. That is the four Vedas. And then all these Vedas are to be preserved, they are to be studied and taught. And for that, there are 6 important elements. They are called Vedangas. That is, one is pronunciation, then the practice, the methods of rituals, and then the etymology, the grammatical descriptions of the words used in Vedic tradition, the grammar, and then the prosody, the meter, the meters and in which these mantras are composed, and also Vedic astrology. It is called Siksha, Kalpam, Vyagaranam, Niruktam, Chanda, Jyotisham. The traditional Sanskrit words, Siksha, Kalpam, Vyagaranam, Niruktam, Chanda, Jyotisham. And something very interesting is Siksha includes pronunciation. So phonetics is a very ancient science which is embedded in the Vedic heritage. So the first science connected to Vedic study is the science of pronunciation, phonetics, and then of course the description of different Vedic rituals mentioned, kalpas, then grammar, Vedic grammar. That is also very extensive, a very extensive area of learning in Vedic tradition, plus etymology, and then the descriptions of the different meters in which these Vedic mantras are composed, chandas, and Vedic astrology. And then there are these Puranas, the mythological works. There are 18 important Puranas, and there are 18 subsidiary Puranas, that is Mahapuranas and Upapuranas. Then there is logic, then there is the science of ethics and morality, and then of course there are the science of constitution, the constitutional rules and regulations that are applied in the life of the individual, the family, and society. And then of course we have the Upavedas and Ayurveda. The school of medicine is one of them. Ayurveda, Dhanurveda, Gandharvaveda, and Arthashastras. So Ayurveda is the science of medicine. Dhanurveda is actually, you can find that the ancient India had produced many ancient martial arts, which are supposed to be the original forms of the martial arts found in the Far Eastern countries. Some of the descriptions of those sciences, including, for example, different parts of the human body, vulnerable points of human body, are described in one branch of the Vedic learning. It is called Dhanurveda, Gandharveda, which includes music, dance forms, folklore, and so on, and plus Arthashastra. It deals with just judicial teachings and so on. Now, after this, we are coming to philosophy proper. I mentioned earlier there are altogether 12 systems of philosophy to be considered. 6 systems are called theistic systems, called Astika Darsanas, and then there are 6 Nastika Darsanas, which are not strictly speaking atheistic, but so can be called agnostic also. So in Indian tradition, philosophy is called an atheistic philosophy, not because it doesn't accept God, but because it doesn't accept the authority of the Vedas. So if a system of philosophy rejects the authority of the Vedic tradition, that system of philosophy may be called Nastika Darsanas, or may be called atheistic. So, for example, some of the systems of Buddhist philosophy, then the Charvaka system, the Jaina system, they don't accept the authority of the Vedas. They're supposed to be agnostic or atheistic. Then, of course, there are 6 Astika Darsanas called theistic systems. Among them, of course, there are different schools. Some schools fully endorse the authority of the Vedas, and some school never reject, but they don't accept the authority of the Vedas to the same extent. For example, Vedanta is one of those systems which completely accept the authority of the Vedas. It's an important thing. And also Purva Mimamsa. Now, and of course, there are other, the schools like the school of logic, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Indian atomism, and of course yoga, philosophy of yoga, and Sankhya. Now we are coming to Vedanta. And in that category, Madhva philosophy is included. Shankaracharya, Madhva, Ramanuja, Vallabha, Chaitanya, and all these systems are included under the category of the Vedantic tradition, Vedantic philosophical systems, of which we already completed Shankaracharya's Advaita philosophy. Then we dealt with Ramanuja system, and now we are discussing the system of Madhvacharya, which is the polar opposite of Advaita. It's called the Dvaita system. It is called a Dvaita system just because it accepts 2 fundamental, eternal, absolute realities. Or any system, in the broader sense, any system that accepts more than one absolute reality, one eternal absolute reality or absolute category, that system can be called Dvaita system. And here, for serious students, this should be kept in mind. The word Dvaita should be understood in its proper context. In the philosophical tradition, when we use the word Dvaita, it directly implies the system of Madhvacharya, who lived in the 12th century AD, because he is the original exponent of Dvaita system. So the ideas are found in many earlier books, but he is the original exponent of Dvaita system as a distinct philosophical tradition in the 12th century. But at the same time, you find in ancient books, for example, the Gaudapada Karika, and in many books you find the word Dvaita, the Sanskrit word, dualistic or dualism. It mostly implies the Sankhya system, because Madhvacharya's Dvaita philosophy emerged only in the 12th century, but there were many philosophical systems before Madhvacharya which accepted more than one absolute, fundamental, eternal category or reality. They are all generally called Dvaita. Sankhya system is one of those examples, one of those systems of philosophy which is called Dvaita in the broad canons of Indian philosophy. For example, I often quoted many times in the Gaudapada Karika, which is written around 6th century AD. There is a well-known verse: Susiddhanta vyavasthasu dvaitino nishidadidam parasparam viruddhyante taihi ayamna viruddhyate. If a system of philosophy accepts more than one fundamental category, then there is always a scope for quarrels and different opinions with other systems of philosophy, which also accepts more than one fundamental category. So there is a possibility for mutual conflicts in all dualistic systems, but Advaita has no quarrel with it. This is the meaning of Gaudapada Karika's statement. So in that context, as I mentioned earlier, it is a direct reference to Sankhya system and not Madhvacharya system. Now, coming to this, directly coming to the subject. One important point to remember, and this may be quite a bewildering revelation to many, who is not intimately familiar with the traditional orthodox way of learning, teaching and learning Indian systems of philosophy. That is a simple fact. I shall give an example, then I shall explain why. See, in the Advaita tradition, I am giving an example. There was a great teacher, a great author, a great philosopher. He lived sometimes in the 17th or 18th century. His name was Appaya Dikshita, and he wrote no less than 100 books on Advaita Vedanta. And he wrote many books on different subjects. He wrote books on aesthetics. He wrote books on Advaita philosophy. He wrote books on literary criticism. And in fact, in short, he was the author of 100 books, no less than 100 books. Now, one of his contemporary writers belonging to Madhva tradition was Vijayendra Tirtha. So I am coming to an interesting aspect to be kept in mind when we study. That will make us get a real understanding of the philosophical landscape in which these systems of philosophy evolved in India. So the author of these more than 100 books, who was an Advaitin, his name is Appaya Dikshita. And there was an equally great writer from the Madhva tradition, from the Dvaita tradition. His name was Vijayendra Tirtha. It's a well-known name. They were rivals, they were also friends, and they were contemporaries. Vijayendra Tirtha wrote 104 books because he was a rival of Appaya Dikshita. They were friends. They were competing with each other in writing the maximum number of books. They were sometimes refuting with each other, and they were also close friends. This is important. Do you know why? The reason is, maybe Appaya Dikshita went to the same temple worshipping, and he's an Advaitin, and Vijayendra Tirtha must have gone to the same temple. They lived more or less in the same area, that is close to in the southern part of the city of Chennai, in what is now known as Tamil Nadu. Both of them, Vijayendra Tirtha was from Karnataka originally, but he lived in that area near Kumbakonam. And Appaya Dikshita also belonged more or less to the same region. So they were friends, they were rivals, they were contemporaries. And they were both of them were great devotees also. So this may be something very surprising, almost bewildering. It's almost like, for example, the Pope and Martin Luther meeting each other in the same church on a Sunday, Sabbath or confession. Can you imagine that? It's something like that. It is as inconceivable as something like that. But in Indo-Vedantic tradition, this was not inconceivable, very natural. So apart from their philosophical convictions and different views, they were close friends. And this is always, even now, this is the case. And then again, I mentioned in the last class, I mentioned something, a very important topic. That is, why this, the concept of Maya or Mithya became a bone of contention. How it became a very serious subject for conflicting views, defense, refutations, again counter refutations among different authors. In fact, in the Vedanta tradition, there is a tradition of Panchagranthi is called. That is Shankaracharya's Bhashya on Brahma Sutras. And Brahma Sutras themselves were written by Vyasa. So Brahma Sutra, then Shankaracharya's commentary on it, then a commentary on Shankaracharya's commentary, that is Bhamadi, then a commentary on Bhamadi, Kalpataru, and then a commentary on Kalpataru, Apayadikshita. So you can find 5 books altogether. One further explained and commented upon by another. So you can imagine, Bhadrayana Vyasa wrote Brahma Sutras, Shankaracharya wrote a commentary on Brahma Sutras, is Bhashya, and then Vajaspati Misra wrote a commentary on Brahma Sutra, Bhashya Shankaracharya, Bhamati, and then Amalananda wrote a commentary on Bhamati, it's called Kalpataru, and Apayadikshita wrote a commentary on Kalpataru, it's called Kalpataru Parimala. Now, reading all these from the other side, Jayatirtha, Valtirtha, and then from the Dvaita tradition, great writers like Jayatirtha, Vaditirtha, and then Vyasatirtha, and Vijendra Tirtha, all of them started writing counter books. But it never really took the form of any kind of mutual conflict. The only exception in Indian history, where a rival school was subject to persecution, was something related to Ramanuja's time. Because when Ramanuja was expounding his Sri Vaishnavism or Vishishtadvaita, the ruler of that tradition, the ruler of the region, Madurai region, that is Chidambaram, or this temple, the ruler was a Shaiva. And the Shaiva king insisted that Ramanuja also should accept Shiva as a greater god than Vishnu. And Ramanuja refused to accept that, and he had to run away from the place. I think this is the only occasion in Indian history where anything approaching any kind of persecution ever happened. And that happened during the time of Ramanujacharya, when the local king was a Shaiva, and he used to persecute non-Shaivites, and he wanted Ramanuja and his followers to proclaim that Shiva is a greater god than Vishnu, his own god. So Ramanuja had to run away from there, and also his group had to run away from there, and they took shelter in Mysore, in what is known Melkote. It's an interesting story. Otherwise, there was always mutual understanding, friendship and respect, mutual respect among different writers. This is an important point to remember. But one exception even to this tradition, not in social relationship or not in the form of persecution, but in the form of dialectical confrontation, can be found in the writings of Dvaita tradition. What it means is, very often among the followers of Madhvacharya, I am going to give you examples, quoting from Madhvacharya's own books, to substantiate the important point we are going to discuss now. Even in Madhvacharya's own writings, you find very strong statements. For example, once he makes a statement we have to keep, we have to, uh, we have to be always hostile to towards these Advaitins. Prachanna Bauddha Vishaye Parito Yadadhum. Now, this is a statement from Vedanta Desika. In his Sadadushani is an important book from their perspective. Vedanta Desika is the commentator of the great books in Sri Vaishnava tradition, like Jayatirtha, who wrote commentaries and tekas in Madhva tradition. Vedanta Desika, or Venkatanatha, another name, he wrote commentaries and he wrote some of the most foundational texts in Ramanuja's Vishtadvaita. For example, he wrote this Sadadushani, 100 problems, or maybe called untenables. Ideas which are not at all acceptable, logically defensible, that you find in Advaita tradition. So Sada means 100, Dushani means problems, defects. It's a list of 100 defects in Advaita system. And so he raised, and so they used to call Advaitins as Prachanna Bauddhas. We will discuss that very soon. I discussed in my last class, in the Advaita tradition, there was frequently a kind of overemphasis on the aspect of Maya. So, in traditional Advaita, Maya is responsible for this world appearance, not the world, but for the world appearance. So, frequently, this concept of Maya assumed the status of a distinct category in the writings of post-Shankarite authors. So, non-Advaitins, in their attacks on Advaita, began to charge that Advaita accepts two fundamental realities. One is Brahman, the other is Maya. You have to remember, Advaitins never mentioned that Maya is a category. Maya is only a kind of indescribable phenomenon that is responsible for a misunderstanding that this world of names and forms is absolutely real, is absolute reality. That misunderstanding is caused by Maya. That's what it essentially means. So, and this world itself is caused by this wrong notion, which can be called Maya, which is anirvachaniya, which is indescribable or non-definable. So, it may be argued, if you don't fully understand what Advaita implies, it may be argued that Advaitins accept the reality of Maya. So, there are two realities in Advaita. So, to answer, to defend Advaita from these allegations, charges, put forward by Dvaita philosophers, one great Advaita scholar in the later half of 16th century, his name was Prakashananda. He wrote a well-known book. It is called Vedanta Siddhanta Muktavali. In that book, he articulated a very unique doctrine, which is now very popular among the ultra-modern internet Advaitins. So they will tell you Advaita means a group of people who tell you that this world doesn't exist. The seed cause of this misunderstanding can be found in Prakashananda's Siddhanta Muktavali. In that book, he articulated the doctrine that the world exists only so long as you perceive it. I will come to this very soon. I shall try to give a complete description of this after some time. This doctrine was called Drishti Srishtivada. Drishti means perception, seeing. Srishti means creation of this world. So this world exists only when you are aware of it. Something exists only when you see it. If you don't see it, it is as good as non-existent. Remember, it is a total distraction, a distortion of Shankaracharya's original philosophy. Shankaracharya takes pains to defend the view that the world is not just a perception. This Drishti Srishtivada, or the idea, the doctrine that the world exists only so long as you perceive it. In its Vedantic aspect, you can find in a well-known book, which many of you must have heard about it, Yoga Vasishtha. It is a kind of subjective idealism. Now, what happened was, this takes Advaita very close to Vijnanavada. And Vijnanavada, as many of you know, is a kind of subjective idealism. Pravritti Vijnanavada. Later, evolutive Vijnanavada is called Pravritti Vijnanavada. And according to them, this world is only a mental activity. Now, remember, Shankaracharya is totally innocent of all these ideas. So what happened was, when you try to heal a wound, you may put a badge, some kind of a plaster, you may put some ointment, and you may give a dressing. And that itself becomes a terrible wound. What happens? This is what happened. With this Prakashananda, apparently, as he thought, he was trying to defend Advaita, but what happened was, it led to so much of misunderstanding of Advaita. So I shall come to some aspects of this concept of Drishti Srishtivada, because anyone who studies Advaita should keep this in mind. It's a neo-Vedanta, and many of these modern internet writers who declare themselves to be doctors and engineers and then promise to teach you Vedanta. There are many such vlogs and blogs and writers, modern internet sensations. They introduce themselves. I'm an engineering degree, or I'm an engineer, I'm a doctor, I'm a space technology, and I'm going to teach you Vedanta. Something like, somebody introduces himself to be a doctor and tells you, I'm going to build a bridge for you. Or somebody who introduces himself to be an engineer and who promises to do a surgery for you. Something like that. Now we'll come to this Drishti Srishtivada. Actually, this should be clearly understood, because many of the current misunderstandings about Advaita, which people sometimes interpret as kind of life-negating, world-negating, utopian philosophy. The seed cause of these misunderstandings can be found in this Drishti Srishtivada, which is expounded by this well-known writer. His name is Prakashananda. There are two Prakashananda. Prakashatmayadi is the writer he was a far greater scholar and Vedantin. He was the one who wrote a well-known book. It is a commentary on Panchapadika. It's called Panchapadika Vivarana. His name is Prakashatmayadi, who lived much earlier. Prakashananda lived in the later half of 16th century. So, and now we are coming to that. As I mentioned earlier, there are statements in Yoga Vasishtha, Ajnata Satta Abhyupagamatvam. So, something that seems to exist when you are seeing it, but otherwise it doesn't exist. And remember, I gave this background. The reason why Prakashananda brought up this doctrine, the reason is this. In order to explain the fact that the world is something relative but not absolute, something that is experienced to be real before you get Brahmajnanam. sarva loka vivakaranam satyatupapattihi. The world and all activities in this world appear to be real. They have a reality prag brahmatma vijnanat. Till or before you get brahmajnanam, before you get the highest Advaitic experience, this world, all these things appear to be real. Yada swapna dristasya prag prabodhat. Just as a dreamer in dream thinks that what he is dreaming about, what he is seeing is real, and he recognizes that these things are only dreams only when he comes out of dream. This is the original Advaitic view. So according to Shankaracharya, the world of objects is not absolutely non-existent. It is not a mental activity. These objects that we experience have a reality outside of our mind. It's not just mental activity. So, but then this Prakashananda in his book, he asserted it is only a mental activity. And that took Advaita very closer, dangerously closer to Vijnanavada, or subjective idealism. Now, and of course, because in Vijnanavada, they call it Vijnana Matrada Buddhi. So it means, in fact, surprisingly, that term is used, Vijnana Matra. That word is sometimes used by Prakashananda also in his book. So what really happened was, when Prakashananda tried to defend Advaita, saying that this Maya and the world created by Maya are all mental activities, it amounted to some kind of Vijnanavada. So both Ramanujites, the followers of Ramanuja, and Madhvacharya, both of them tried to accuse or tried to allege that Advaitins are just a kind of a new school of Buddhist Vijnanavadins, Shunyavadins. That's why, in fact, this strong language is used by Madhvacharya in a well-known book, Tattwamayanandaji. He wrote a number of books, you should remember, Brahma Sutra, that is his Madhvacharya, Brahma Sutra, Anuvyakhana, Gita Bhashya, Bhagavata Tatparya Nirnaya, Mahabharata Tatparya Nirnaya, Vishnu Tattva Vinirnaya, which already we discussed much earlier. So among his important books was Tattwamayanandaji. In that book, for example, Madhvacharya says, Shunyavadina Shunyam Tadeva Maya Mayidanavaha. So Mayidana, there are demons. He calls them demons who are bringing Maya. So I mean, not a compliment, They are all demons. So he said these Advaitins are propagating a kind of Buddhist nihilism, Shunyavada. And therefore he says, Palayuddhum Turaya Maidanavaha Sarvajno Harirayadi Tarkagamadhirabhit. So he says. So you run away, we are coming. That it means we Dvaitins are coming, Palayuddhum Turaya Maidanavaha. Your demons who are talking about this magic, the world is a magic, who talk like that. Sarvajno Harihi Ayadi. Hari, Vishnu is coming, who is omniscient, all-knowing. So better you run away. So you can find such expressions. It's an important, Now you don't find anything like that in Shankara's Bhashyas anywhere. So you can see a great difference there. Because he wants to, Madhvacharya wanted to establish that this world of changes, the world and the objects in this world which are changing all the time, it's almost like a flow. It is absolutely real. Everything changing in this world is real. It's almost, to give an example, suppose you have, let's say, 10 different types of golden ornaments. Madhvacharya will tell you each ornament is different from each other ornament in a very fundamental manner. Means everything is different. So names and forms are different. Advaitins say, Madhvacharya says, names and forms are different, therefore it is essentially fundamentally different. So he says, Jagrat Pravaha Satyoyam Panjaveda Samannidaka. This world consisting of 5 changes, it is Satyoyam, I am Satya. I mean this Pravaha, this flow, this samsara, this Jagat, this world of changes coming one after another in a kind of unbroken succession, it is absolutely real and consists of 5 changes. So, Jivesayor Bhidachaiva Jiva Bheda Parasparam Jadesayor Jadanamcha Jada Jiva Bhida Tatha. This all comes in Mahabharata Alpere Nirnaya. You can find in Madhvacharya's writings. So, Madhvacharya's concept of how a devotee approaches God, that is something very similar to the classical definitions of bhakti or devotion in the writings of Narada, Shandilya and other teachers of bhakti. Shandilya Bhakti Sutras, Narada Bhakti Sutras. There are also many statements in the Bhagavata Purana. So, he says, Jnana Purva Parasneho Nityo Bhakti Idya Vidiyade. That again comes in Mahabharata Talpere Nirnaya. I mean, deciding the essence, the central theme of Mahabharata. That's the title of the book. So, Jnana Purva Parasneho. So, bhakti is nothing but some kind of eternal love. Nityo Parasneho. Some kind of eternal love. It is Jnana Purva, which actually is a combination of knowledge and bhakti combined. This is the definition of bhakti according to Madhvacharya. And then, of course, I mentioned earlier, the Madhvacharya believes that there are certain people who are always in the books, the good books of Vishnu, like Lakshmi. And there are those who can strive and reach moksha. Mukta prapya param Vishnum tad deha samsita api. So, liberated souls, those who are spiritually enlightened, param Vishnum prapya, after attaining Vishnu Loka, tad deha samsita api, and he becomes completely depending upon Vishnu, taradamena dhishtandi gunai ananda purvakaihi. There are gradations of liberation. Some devotees are closer to Vishnu, closer to God. Some devotees are not so close, they are still distant. So, you can find this difference among different jivas, even in their degree of enlightenment. That means the idea of difference is so well established in Madhva system. And remember one important thing. Madhvacharya tried to establish difference, criticizing the Advaitins' concept of oneness and identity. But generally speaking, according to modern authors, I'm talking about, when I talk about modern authors, I'm talking about some of these great philosophers of India and abroad who tried to read and understand, interpret the systems of philosophy in English language. Sandas Gupta, Hiriyanna, Dr. Adhakrishnan, T.A.P. Mahadev, and a few others. There are many others in India. And also in Western tradition, Dr. Tibbet, who wrote about Dvaita and also Ramanuja system. According to them, the allegations of taking Vedanta to Buddhism are somewhat weak, and whenever the Advaitins try to write books to defend the Advaita position against the Dvaita criticism of Advaita, Very often it can be generally found that Madhvacharya, though his followers produced many outstanding critics and dialecticians, his writings were not logically acceptable. Generally speaking, they were weak compared to the views. For example, the writings of Jayatirtha, the writings of the earlier direct disciples of Madhvacharya, to charge Advaita with some kind of, taking Vedanta closer to Buddhist nihilism, that are being defended, that are being criticized by Advaitins who try to defend Advaita system. For example, Chitsukacharya, who wrote Tattwamayanandaji, and also Anandabodha in his writings. So, and also some of the later writings of Advaitins, Madhusudana Saraswati and others. When you read the Advaitins' defense of the fundamental positions of Advaita, you can see that the criticism of Dvaitins against Advaita were rather misconceived and somewhat weak, because it is essentially based on one fundamental principle. That is, Advaitins tried to project two fundamental realities. Though they call themselves Advaitins, still they cannot survive, or rather Advaita cannot survive without Maya. So they frequently call Advaitis Mayavadins. So Mayavadi means, and the word Mayavadi is very common in the Dvaita literature whenever they refer to Advaitins. For example, Tattwamayanandaji Gunai Anandapurvakaihi. So the essential difference in terms of the gradation of spiritual attainment is an important point that is emphasized again and again in the Madhva tradition. So what I wanted to mention till now is, on the one hand, we can see at the dialectical level, there was a kind of uncompromising attitude on both sides trying to criticize and criticize the opposite views and also defending their own views. Still, by and large, from the standpoint of maybe kind of impassioned logic, impartially, if you analyze, you can see the attack of Dvaitins, of Madhva philosophers against Advaita was not very effective. They were more than effectively countered, and Advaita position was strongly defended by later Advaitins like Madhusudana Saraswati and his other writers who wrote commentaries on Advaita Siddhi and other books. This is an important point to remember. On the one hand, we can see at the personal level, they were all devotees of God, both Advaitins and also Dvaitins. At the same time, the dialectical level, they were criticizing each other, each one defending his own position and attacking the rival school's position. But this did not go beyond a kind of intellectual warfare. It never took the form of any kind of physical warfare. No kind of excommunication, burning and stake, and driving away huge communities of people because they didn't agree with your own form of worship. That sort of thing was totally unheard of in India's philosophical landscape and tradition, except this one instance which I referred to just now. For example, Ramanuja lived close to a temple called the Srirangam temple, and the neighboring kingdom and the place around were in the hands of kings who believed in Shaiva doctrine, because Shiva is the supreme deity. So they often, not always, but there were instances of persecution of Vaishnavas by Shaiva kings. They had to run away from their place and take shelter elsewhere. But this was only in certain places, but not very few. There are very few instances of this kind of persecution. Just wanted to mention that point. So after this next class, we'll take up another aspect of Madhva system. Then we'll conclude. Then we'll go to Vallabha, Nimbarka and other schools of Vedanta. Thank you. I can ask questions, yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
I have the only hand up so far, and so I will venture with a question.
Yeah, please.
It's so refreshing to hear that the dialectical confrontations were on the friendly level.
Yeah.
And but I do have a question about the context for that in terms of historical empires,
Yeah.
especially on the frontiers and, in Turkey, in what is modern Iran,
Yeah.
in Kashmir. And you did say that, there were occasional flare-ups from the Shaiva tradition, but generally speaking, no. The reason I ask about this is because some of these challenges continue not just through the internet writers, but also in academic departments of comparative religion
Yeah.
to this day.
True.
And it's not an insignificant matter. It persists throughout so many centuries.
Yeah.
And what the question is, the mystery traditions of these areas, the Mithraic traditions, the imperial aspects of it. How much did that play a part in the dialectic?
Yeah. So only one instance you talked about Kashmir. Kashmir Shaivism is an important school, but same Kashmir was also the center of Advaita. Shankaracharya's some of his most important dialectical confrontations took place. Remember, it was the 8th century, that 400 years, 500 years before Madhvacharya, of course, in Kashmir. But I tell you, historically speaking, with the advent of Islam in India, the picture began to change radically, historically speaking. At least in northern states. In southern states, for example, Vijayanagar was an important empire. And also, after Vijayanagar empire around from the 12th, 13th century right up to 16th century, up to Battle of Talikota was somewhere in 1590, around that time. And Vijayanagar, its early origins in 13th, 12th, 13th, 14th century, that's 14th century, early part of the 13th century. So you find, to give an example, just a kind of descriptive example. Vijayanagar Empire, the greatest king of Vijayanagar Empire was Krishnadevaraya. Now, he encouraged and promoted different devotional and philosophical schools. His guru was Vyasatirtha. But at the same time, during Vijayanagar Empire, some of the greatest Advaitin dialecticians also flourished in the same kingdom of Vijayanagar. Actually, the Vijayanagar Empire itself was inspired by a great Advaitin who was a teacher, who was the monk, the abbot of Sringeri, was Vidyaranya. Two Hindu Kshatriyas, means the warrior class, kings, were converted to Islam during Islamic invasions. They were reconverted, brought back to Hinduism, and they were taught to found a new dynasty, the Vijayanagar dynasty, Harihara and Bukka. They were converted, they were brought back to Hinduism, and the Vijayanagar became the custodian, the defender of Hindu tradition for more than 350 years in the south. And that period saw a great flourish, promotion of different arts, learning, dance, music forms. The greatest of, maybe the earliest and the greatest of the great Carnatic musicians, Purendradasa. He was living in the same kingdom, the capital city of Vijayanagar, Hampi. He was living there. The greatest, he was the one who actually consolidated the grammatical system, it's one of the fundamental notations of the Carnatic music tradition in the 16th century, Purendradasa. He was living in the kingdom of Vijayanagar, and he was being promoted by Krishnadeva, the great kings of Vijayanagar. During the same time, the great Dvaita scholars and monks and mystics flourished, wrote great books and propagated their tradition. And the same period also saw the emergence and the activities of the great Advaita scholars. For example, this Vidyaranya, then Sayana, who wrote commentaries on all the four Vedas, and again this Prakashatma Yeti, all of them flourished in their kingdom, remember. So Dvaitins were promoted by these kings, Advaitins were promoted by these kings, great devotional mystics were promoted by these kings, and it was one of the greatest of Dvaita post-Madhva Dvaitins, Vyasatirtha, who inspired Purandaradasa to write more, I think almost more than 450,000 compositions in Kannada language to make Bhagavata philosophy popular among the common folk, writing in the vernacular. So you can imagine. Again, the Maratha Empire, their influence extended all the way to extreme south, especially Tamil Nadu. Actually, they were the ones responsible for founding some of the great libraries like Saraswati Mahal Library. You know, there was a great mystic his name was Sadasiva Brahmendra, who was a wandering monk, who was a great scholar, who wrote great books on yoga, Vedanta, and also he was a fabulous poet who wrote some of the most astounding mystical poems in Sanskrit. And he was also promoted and encouraged by kings, the local area. So the kings and the imperial seat of power never made any discrimination. All were welcome in their courts, whether you are Dvaitin, Advaitin, whatever it is. It didn't matter. It didn't matter, in fact. I give this example. Ramanuja was welcomed in Mysore kingdom. He was given shelter. The king gave him a few villages somewhere, and he built his monastery, the temple, and the tradition continues to our times, to this day. So, this is very interesting. I mean, the very culture of intolerance came from across the borders. It was so inconceivable in Indian context. So, I think only after the advent of Islam in India, this culture of intolerance at the political, social, and religious level started, not before that. It's a very interesting thing.
Maharaj, would that apply also to the proponents of Buddhism? Was there also a gentle dispute rather than a culture of intolerance?
There was no cultural intolerance at all. As you mentioned, you remember, I should mention this. This is something which is often missed by those who don't study the traditional scriptures from traditional teachers. See, when Shankaracharya criticized Buddhism, people frequently imagine that he was criticizing Buddha. And they often forget that Shankaracharya lived 1300 years after Buddha's passing away. So by the time Shankaracharya was born, Buddhism had become something totally different, indistinguishable from the original teachings of Buddha. This happened only in Buddhism as it survived in Indian subcontinent, not among Buddhists who were living in China, Cambodia, Japan or Far Eastern countries. In Indian context, you know what happened? A large number of Hindu Sanskrit Pandits, they joined the Buddhist ranks, they became Buddhist monks, and what will they do? Go on writing books. Just like the Advaitins and all they were all the traditional Pandits. These people, they joined Buddhism. They started writing books, so you can find the Sautrantika, Vaibhashika, Vijnanavada, Shunyavada. When I discuss this Gaudapada Karika, you can find Gaudabada, how Gaudabada takes up different systems of philosophy. Sautrantikas, they criticize Vaibhashikas. Sautrantikas, both are realists. One school of realists believe in inference. The other accept only direct perception. So there is a fight among them. So also Sunyavadins and Vijnanavadins. So what happened when Shankaracharya was born? The most popular school of Buddhism was some kind of a extreme kind of subjective idealism. It is called Pravritti Vijnana. And according to them, everything that you see is only a perception. I mentioned earlier. So what Prakashananda claimed to have expounded in his Vedanta Siddhanta Muktavali, kind of Drishti Srishtivada, you can find that in his Vedantic form in Yoga Vasishta, but in Buddhist form you can find in Vijnanavada. Because Vijnanavadins believe, they totally reject the reality of any external objects. This is a very important principle in Buddhism. The difference is that the Srististivadins, they accept the doctrine that everything is just a mental activity. The objects in the world, whatever you pursue, they have no existence other than as a mental activity. And they deny the existence of anything as eternal. But the Srististivadins believe that Brahman is one reality, everything else is just a mental activity. Buddhists believe that there is nothing that is permanent. Even Brahman also they don't accept. Everything is just a mental activity. So the Vijñapti Matrata Siddhi, one book is there in Buddhism. Vijñapti Matrata Siddhi. How to attain that level of experience when you realize that everything in this world is just a perception, just a sensation. So when Shankaracharya came, he took up this doctrine and he said it is wrong. He said external objects do have a reality, but that reality is only vyavaharika satta, only empirical reality, not absolute reality, because they keep changing. He did not deny their reality. He only said they are not absolutely real, but relatively they are real. So there are long passages in Brahma Sutra Bhashya where Shankaracharya refutes Vijnanavada. He says, dream and waking state are not the same, he says. According to Vijnanavadins and according to this Prakashananda, dream and waking state experiences are equally unreal. Shankaracharya says, no. He says, in dream you see certain things, and when you are within dream, it is true, you are only aware of what you see in dream. But a waking state, you understand dreams are dreams. Now, but in dream state, you don't understand that waking states are waking states. So in waking state, you can cancel. Oh, I had a dream that I had a wonderful lunch. But then in waking state, you understand it's just a dream only, a thought. But in dream state, you cannot contemplate and think, well, waking state is only waking state. You don't do that in dream. So in waking state, you can go back to your previous experience and intellectually analyze what you experienced. But that's not possible in dream state. So, and again, you can practice spiritual disciplines in waking state. You cannot do that in dream state. In dream state, there is a kind of helplessness. You are under the influence of some memories, because dream is nothing but a kind of replay of what we experience in waking state. Not exactly, but a distant, remote replay in subtle form of what you experience in waking state. You are dreaming. That's what he says. So Shankaracharya says, dreams and waking state are not the same. There is a distinction. So he's actually pointing out the dialectical problem in Buddhist Vijnanavada. But again, remember, Buddha never taught these things. That's important. See, many modern writers, they don't understand this and they won't keep in mind that Buddha actually was totally innocent of all this. He never bothered about these things. He was bothered something more important questions of human life. So, in fact, in Shankaracharya's system, there is a kind of realism and idealism harmoniously joined. That you find in Advaita. But in Yoga Vasishtha, this kind of ultra-idealism. The world you experience only when you see it, otherwise it doesn't exist. So now what is happening in the main problem that you are facing in internet age is people are very much interested in Yoga Vasishtha. Now I am coming to something more important. Thank you for asking this question. It gives me a chance to explain this. So one important point to remember is, see, dream experiences are unreal, they are just dreams. You realize this in waking state. Now, when you reach a kind of transcendental state, then only you realize that waking state experiences are actually unreal. That is the highest state of spiritual mystical experience. When Sri Ramakrishna was sitting samadhi, the world doesn't exist for him at that time. At that time, dream and waking state equations are the same. Remember, from the transcendental perspective. But within the empirical level, there is a difference between dream and waking state. But the highest absolutist level, that difference vanishes. When I give this yoga, this Mundagopanishad Gaudapadakariga, you can find 144 classes in internet. I give this example. See, suppose you are sitting for an examination, you'll be considered to have passed an examination only when you get 100% mark. If you get 99%, you cannot get admission. Just imagine, for argument's sake. You can get admission, or you'll be considered to have passed the examination only when you need 100%. Getting 99% and 0 are the same from the standpoint of getting admission. But suppose 5 students, all the 5 have failed to get admission. One has got 0 mark, another has got 90% mark, another one got 99%. All these belong to the same category so far as getting admission is concerned. Because you can get admission only when you get 100%. But you leave that alone, then you can say the one who got 99% is certainly more brilliant than one who has got 0 mark. There's a difference. It's called Idaredara Bheda means internal difference. Idaredara Bheda means. So, within the empirical level, there is a difference between dream and waking state. From the transcendental perspective, if you look at it, there is no difference between waking state and dream state. It's something like, suppose you are reach the highest samadhi, where you transcended the empirical. At that time, whether it is rope or snake doesn't make matter any difference. But at the empirical level, it makes a difference. The rope and snake are two different things. But in the transcendental perspective, let's say. Like that, so now Yoga Vasishtha is speaking from the highest transcendental perspective alone. Yoga Vasishtha never comes down to the empirical. It talks only from the highest transcendental perspective. So when you read Yoga Vasishtha, you go beyond mind, the world doesn't exist, the world is a dream. It is okay, but it is wonderful as a doctrine. It is wonderful as a philosophy. It is not just a philosophy, it's a fact. But it's a fact that you can experience when you reach that level of the highest mystical level. It is not something that you can believe in. It is something that you can only experience. And that experience, only experience, that is frequently forgotten. So you can find you go beyond mind, life is a dream. So, see, Sri Ramakrishna also said life is a dream, world is a dream. Then he told you go and pray to mother. Remember? People think life, world is a dream, so I have nothing else to do. I am Brahman, all right, nothing to do. You don't have to study Vedanta. I am Brahman. It's only a word. That's why Sri Ramakrishna, while teaching the highest Advaita, he also told a devotee, okay, now you do some good deed, you do some spiritual disciplines, you go and pray, and you live good life. That's what he said. He came down straight to the earth level and told them, all right, you should reach that level. Before that, you should do some spiritual disciplines. That is not often understood. People sometimes believe that if they believe they are Brahman, they become Brahman. It doesn't happen. That's a great danger of this modern, the explosion or implosion, you may call whatever you want, of internet and Vedanta. Shankaracharya's original Advaita is so realistic and so idealistic in a very sublime sense. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. David and then Mark. Thank you. Go ahead, David.
Yeah.
Hello, Swami.
Hello. Yeah.
My question. So, if I understand correctly, when they say to discriminate, when Sri Ramakrishna says you must discriminate between the real and the unreal,
Yeah.
Basically, and then that Maya is both neither real nor unreal.
Yeah.
Is what he's saying is that Maya is real only in essence, and Brahman is real. So is that Maya is both unreal and real? It's because it's real in essence, but not in appearance.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So, we will realize that Maya is only in appearance. The world is only in appearance when we go beyond Maya, when we go beyond the world. Till that moment, everything is real. That is the greatness of Shankaracharya. He clearly states, this world is real, he says, but not for a Ramana Maharshi, not for a Sri Ramakrishna. No, the world is not real. And even for them, at that samadhi level, this world is not real. After that, when they come to the world, they do puja, or anyone for that matter. They do spiritual disciplines. Sri Ramakrishna was dancing and singing and puja and all going on all his life. And he was also in samadhi. Shankaracharya also was doing, maybe we don't know whether he was dancing or not, but there is no doubt he was singing all his life. Because no less than 118 magnificent devotional classics written there. A man who must have been singing all his life. And he was the exponent of jnana, the highest jnana. So the point is, when we reach that level of experience, then we don't think that there's a need to draw a line of demarcation. This is an important point. Here we are discussing something that cannot be discussed. We have to discuss. Discussion of something that we cannot discuss, we do as a spiritual practice. Instead of discussing something vulgar, something unpleasant, let us discuss about these great truths. That's the real purpose of Shastram or spiritual studies in Vedanta. So when you study spiritual literature, what happens is, and we seriously discuss these things, debate these things, what happens is, all the dirt and filth of the mind are driven away and they are replaced by these ideas, which are at least not harmful. Remember, Sri Ramakrishna and Shankaracharya they are unanimous in their view that philosophy cannot take you to God. Shabdajalam maharanyam chitta brahmanakaranam. Shankaracharya says, study of books can only cause conflicts in our mind. Bhuktaye natu muktaye. It can only give us some kind of intellectual enjoyment. It cannot lead to liberation. But the problem is, without Shastra, without these scriptures, we cannot reach there. Because these books to be studied in our daily life, so that our mind will be emptied of other ideas, other thought currents which can create obstacles in our spiritual path. Because these thoughts, even these discussions, it takes our mind to a higher sublime level. And it drives away all the dirt and filth from our mind. So our mind is emptied of all this unnecessary stuff. And then the mind becomes naturally absorbed in higher thoughts. But at the same time, they cannot directly take us to the highest reality. This is an important point. Without them, we cannot go to the highest reality. It's an important point. So, and Sri Ramakrishna also says, the bread-winning education. But same Sri Ramakrishna taught Vivekananda to start the monastic order which should propagate these great spiritual truths. How do you explain that? That's a very, very important point, remember. So, and then another question. Suppose one day you become a Buddha, let us say. Then what will you do? Will you start a joint stock company? You will teach these great truths all around you. Anyone who comes to you, you speak of great spiritual truths. You don't do anything else. So you talk about the great spiritual truths. But you tell them that this cannot take you to the highest. But even after reaching the highest, you won't do anything else. That's an important thing. Take any great spiritual person, like Buddha or Christ or anyone. What were they doing all their life? They were spreading great truths. Sermon on the Mount, the great parables are examples of the highest spiritual truths. That's universal. Just like the Upanishads of Sri Ramakrishna's teachings, no doubt about it. But then, all these great masters said that intellect alone cannot take you there. But still they were distributing intellectual food all their life. So, this is an important point, remember. Again, these conflicting views will get self-destroyed once we reach that state of mind. I don't think, suppose Jesus Christ goes to Berkeley Library, he won't read a film magazine. He may read some spiritual book if he goes to a Buddha or any Shankaracharya, Sri Ramakrishna. Also, he may read, even he reads, he will be reading something related to spirituality. They themselves, their book learning is Sabdajala Maharanyam. Shankaracharya, these books of the world of is empty desert. But then when you go there, you read a book only. What else will you read? It's an important point, remember. So, that's...
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah.
There are a couple more questions.
Yeah, please.
From Mark and Sanjay.
Yeah, please.
Good evening, Maharaj.
Yeah, good evening. Yeah.
There's been some discussion this evening about Shavites, Shaivism, Kashmir Shaivism.
Yeah.
And I've been wanting to ask you this question for a long time.
Yeah.
I know that the title of this group is The Foundations of Indian Philosophy.
The foundational text. Because
Foundational text.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it seems like the scope is geared towards Vedanta and Vedantic philosophies. But I've read. Well, let me just tell the truth. My introduction to Indian philosophy and yoga was through Swami Muktananda
Yeah.
and Siddha Yoga,
Yeah.
which he was influential in bringing the philosophy of Kashmir Shaivin, one of the people,
Yeah.
To the West.
Yeah.
And, I was involved with Siddha Yoga for
Yeah.
30, 40 years. And I tried during that time to understand
Yeah.
Kashmir Shaivism. But I'd like to read one sentence from this book. It's called Hindu Philosophy, Theos Bernard. It's an older book. But he says, no account of the philosophical systems of India would be complete without Kashmir Shaivism.
Yeah.
For its its analysis of nature is more comprehensive than any of the six darshanas.
Yeah.
Therefore, it must be included.
Yeah.
Now, when you said foundational text, that's a little bit different than philosophies or. So the point I want to ask you is, do you have any plans to discuss the philosophy of Kashmir Shaivism?
Certainly, by all means, certainly we do have I mentioned this, Kashmir Shaivism is one of the schools included in our list. Yeah, it is there in the list. Certainly, we do have a plan, no doubt about it. Yeah, thank you. I think the original writings that you find below the YouTube, you can find Kashmir Shaivism is listed as one of the topics that we are going to discuss. No doubt about it. Okay? Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Sanjay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah.
For me, this getting into Vishishtha Dvaita and Dvaita has been an eye-opener of kind. I've always asked the question about why did Shankaracharya write all of those hymns, right? So many bhaktis. So my question is more about the bhava that Shankaracharya is trying to teach with all the hymns, right? Now, as much as Advaita is so beautiful, but it is really difficult to practice from a normal person. It can really be confusing. Oh, who is Atman? Everybody is the same, especially Mandukya Upanishad can confuse.
Yeah.
I am realizing through the messages of Sri Ramanuja and even Madhvacharya, and I've grown up going to Mantralaya and other places.
Yeah.
Now I'm gradually getting the bhava to even pray to Sri Ramakrishna. So my question is, so can you talk a little bit about Dvaita being so difficult, not easy for everybody, right? Only realized person. That's my sense right now.
Yeah.
And the importance of bhava in the spiritual journey, the attachment with the love in a way. So that's my question.
Swami Vivekananda indirectly answered your question. He said, we all begin with Dvaita, then we go through Visishta Advaita, and we reach Advaita. So, everyone has to practice Dvaita. So, remember, as I mentioned, Shankaracharya's Stotras, you can find plenty of Dvaita there. You can plenty of Advaita, plenty of Visishta Advaita also. One striking point that we have to remember, it is a great mystery, and this is not frequently answered by scholars. Surprisingly, none of the dialecticians or scholars ever consider the great devotional hymns of Shankaracharya as one of the factors to be discussed, taken into consideration when you criticize Advaita. I mentioned earlier, Shankaracharya's devotional poems, his devotional hymns, are far superior to anything that Ramanuja or Madhva, any of them wrote any time. It is a sheer surprise to me. You can go to any of the Shankara months, they are doing puja all the time. Can you say they did not accept God with form? God with form is one of the fundamental categories, important aspects of Dvaita and Visishta Advaita. So, Advaita accommodates within it both Dvaita and Visishta Advaita. But Dvaita cannot accommodate Advaita, nor Visishta Advaita. Advaita can accommodate all this. The Shankaracharya's original writings include all this. So surprisingly, and even Dr. Radhakrishnan, Hiriyan, of course Hiriyan has got a more comprehensive Radhakrishnan also, but Dr. S.N. Gupta, many of them, I don't think they paid any attention to the great devotional writings of Shankaracharya. It's a great mystery. And I tell you, there is a reason for it. Among dialecticians, I think there was a trend, not for everyone, but at least among many, to look down upon these devotional hymns as something not worthy of consideration when you deal with philosophic classics. That's a big problem. That's their problem, not Shankaracharya's problem. See, a tendency to look down upon. You can imagine, for example, Meera, the great mystical poet. Well, do you give him the same place that you give to Kabir? The same place that you give to some of the great philosophers? You don't do that. People don't do that. Good devotees may do, but others don't do that. Devotional hymns, poetical classics have equal importance. They actually, a verse is potentially more, it has got greater potential to expound a great philosophical truth than prose.
Now I can realize why Sri Ramanujacharya and Madhvacharya rebelled against the Dvaitic teachers.
Because they didn't. See, I mentioned earlier many occasions, Ramanuja was crying and weeping when Yadav Prakasha was teaching him one part from Chandogya Upanishad. Why should he cry and weep? He could have gone to the nearby Vishnu temple or Kanchi temple. But Shankaracharya had visited 500 years before him, 300, 400 years before him. Madhvacharya is a great devotee of Vishnu. Madhvacharya could have gone and read Shankaracharya's own commentary on Vishnu Sahasranama.
Maharaj, does Shankaracharya, through these hymns, does he give any description of how this bhava of all these songs and is written will lead eventually to Advaita?
I can tell you, because you are a devotee, you are not a stranger, I can tell you, the best thing for you to do is just to play one of those songs in the internet and see whether it brings anything to your mind. You can see
I
that.
chant all the time, Maharaj. But I'm saying, does Shankaracharya describe it? It is getting lost. That's my point.
No, it is not getting. There are many translations, there are many expositions of Saundari Lahiri, Ananda Lahiri, Bhavani Ashtagam, Manisha Panchagam, so on. That's there. I think this to be, more of a cultural factor. See, the great dialecticians who are proud of, remember, you can imagine these proud scholars who studied Tarka, Mimamsa, logic, Mimamsa, Vyakarana, Nyaya, Vedanta, all these. They will take care, they will bother to read these magnificent poetical classics, hymns, and enjoy the beauty, the charm, the grandeur. Actually, there are views among many scholars. If Shankaracharya had not written any of these great philosophical classics in prose, still he would be ranked as a far greater poet than Kalidasa. For the sheer musical, powerful, grand musical melody, the symphony you find. The effect of real music or poetical work is, it should convey something to you even if you don't know the meaning of it. This is a very important point, because every song has got two dimensions. One is the music dimension, what it conveys to you even if you don't know its meaning, even if it's a totally strange language to you, still it should convey something to you. That is the real. Then the other dimension, the music, its different grammatical aspects, you can enjoy as a Ganesha, as an admirer, you yourself a musician, you can enjoy the music of another great musician. That is another kind of enjoyment. But the former is more important in judging the greatness of real music. Here I am talking poetry. Music and poetry is great. Shankaracharya's poems, poetical works are great music. And you can just watch and listen to it and see whether it means anything to you. You may not be a Sanskrit scholar, I'm sure, but still you can see it means a lot for you. It gives a lot of meaningfulness of life and existence. You just listen to it. And that's a mark of great music, great art. Any great art. If somebody tells you you don't know anything about music, that's why you don't enjoy my music, then you're not a really great musician. If you're a really great musician, your music will have a direct line of communication into the hearts of the listeners. No matter whether that person is a fan of, is a connoisseur of music, whether he's aware of the different technical class music or not. It's an important thing. Because music is life, it directly enters the human soul and doesn't require the medium of grammar and syntax and etymology. Okay, that's the greatness of Shankaracharya's music. You know, I am myself not a musician, nor a poet, but Shankaracharya's poetical masterpieces mean a lot to me, as much as his philosophical works. It may be greater. That's a mark of greatness in music. Right? Yeah.
Thank you, Madam.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank
Those
you.
are
We'll continue. So thank you very much, especially to those asking questions. Gopinath, you have anything to add? any
Not today, Swamiji. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Rama Krishna Arpanamastu. Yeah, okay, right. Yeah.